to order as it is 8:30, and hopefully folks that are online are able to hear everything that we're talking about this morning. My discussion is really just going to be a discussion about the 2021 budget. And, Lisa, I will turn it over to you.
All right, so this is really, like John mentioned, the 2021 budget discussion, really departmentally focused. So what we're going to see are really what I term the big four funds, which are general, MVH, sewer and stormwater, that are really the use. So those four funds, and then also the health department as they're involved here in the 2021 budget discussion. So that's what we're going to walk through. We're really not going to get into other funds such as like CCD, kind of those other funds. We're really going to focus right now on budget for departments. So go ahead and kind of walk through a lot of those. So this is, and these are out on, I believe Lorena put these all attached to the agenda, and then I think Ashley's going to post these on the budget site also. So to walk you through kind of what you're looking at are what I term the four, now five when you include the health department fund, what was adopted versus in 2020 versus what is proposed for 2021. So the biggest change, obviously you'll see a budget decrease. The biggest change really is capital. If you guys 20 budget, we have some substantial sewer projects where they were expanding wastewater treatment plant capacity from their 8 to 10 MGDs. And so that's what a lot of that big capital outlay in 20 is for. We don't really have that in 21, hence that huge decrease in capital. So what we kind of wanted to show is if you exclude capital, you have a budget increase overall of about $500,000. However, of that increase, we are bringing on the health department. That's included in these numbers. So that health department budget's not about $900,000. So kind of doing some rough math, if you exclude the health department, we're actually, and exclude capital, we're kind of down. We're down almost $400,000 from the 2020 budget that we adopted. So just kind of tried to show some highlights on that as to kind of what big picture changes in those. And we really talk about those four funds a lot because those are the funds that general fund is the most used fund. It's the one that pays for public safety, does a lot of public works, all that good stuff. So that's kind of one of the major funds. Anybody have any questions on this one, or do you just stop me if you do? No.
Where the health department is, correct?
The health department is actually kind of a little bit of all of them. The bulk of them, they have some in personnel, services, and supplies and charges. So they're in all of them, and we have a slide that talks about the health department in detail to show you guys. And Beth also worked very, very closely with Monica to work on her budget. So she can, when we get to that slide, she can give you guys a lot of insight on that. So I'll kind of try to go really, really top level, then fun, and then we'll department. So this is general fund. A lot of this, like I mentioned, is really even though we're not doing PTO cash out this year or giving raises, there are still steps in longevity and all that good stuff in the general fund that account for some personnel changes, updating people's benefit elections, that kind of stuff. Other than that, as you can see, obviously decrease to professional services, which is what that supplies and charges line is. So here, that's the general fund. MVH, just kind of really walk you through a little bit of all these. This is, again, we're kind of holding on where we think we're waiting a little bit on some of this to see if these revenue projections actually match what we have. So we don't have a lot of capital and professional services this year either. Public Works has worked to kind of reduce some costs in professional services for this fund to kind of alleviate some of the pressure. Same with the sewer department. So if you notice on the utility, we've decreased some personnel and sewer, a lot of that was until we got the stormwater fund established on its own, we shifted a lot of costs to the sewer to kind of help absorb that, kind of trying to level those back out. But that's why I wanted to look at this all top level when you combine all the funds, because I think that's a good way to look at it. And then same with the stormwater, pretty flat, even some decreases in stormwater. So I'm gonna go real quick because I have we can look at the judge's budget if he wants, since he joined us, if he wants to. Hello. So.
Slide over here.
Good to see you.
Good to see all of you. Unless you parted. Thank you. Not asking for any increases, obviously. We've done already a good deal of restructuring last year in regards to personnel allocations that I think increased our efficiency and allowed for our staff to serve multiple functions throughout the city. That was a cost savings. In regards to the items that you have there, again, I don't foresee the requiring or necessity of any changes. If there's one item of our budget that I think may have some stress, it is under services and charges. We have seen an increase in the need for interpreter services as we become a more diverse community. Just within the last year, I've had to provide translation services for Mandarin, Russian, Punjabi, Burmese. Believe it or not, Burmese is the second most spoken language in Indiana. Spanish, of course. Probably a couple of others that I have forgotten. And in years past, we had utilized a telephonic conference system known as Language Line. But unfortunately, the quality of their service has deteriorated considerably over the last year. The last Mandarin translator we used from Language Line, I think, standing in front of me who required translation spoke better English than the person on the phone did. So we've had a requirement, I think, to go more towards in-person translators, and there is a cost to that. Other than that, I don't see anything that require changing. Knowing the position that you are all in, having been in that position myself in 2005 and 2008, the suggestion I would make is probably see a cut in supplies. We never use the entirety of the supplies budget. We have funds in the clerk's perpetuation fee fund, which can be used for some supplies, not all, but most supplies. Beth, I think we indicated it's like maybe $17,000 sitting in that right now. It can be used for anything that's in regards to facilitating the records of the court. And I would imagine that at this particular time, the rules involving what you can do with that are going to be considered somewhat more lenient, in as much as there is a good pot of money there in most municipalities and counties that have courts for that funds, and those funds probably need to be utilized. So other than that, I'm open for questions.
Do you have any idea what you might anticipate for interpreter services if you go to an in-person, like average, maybe?
Average cost is, and they'll have minimums because there's a minimum time for them to show up. Average cost is $200 per interpreter service. So if we have 2 per month, you're looking at, good, about 4,800, which is most of what we already have in services and charges. I don't know if we would require more than that or not. We've had a couple of situations where, on one case, we had an interpreter show up twice, and the defendant failed to appear. Him. Now, when that defendant shows up again, their fine will probably go up, because I don't fine based upon an interpreter. If you have an interpreter, that's a service we have to provide. But if you're going to make us spend the money and not show up, then I think we're going to ask you to pay for that.
I was going to have something similar on interpreters. Is there a way maybe you do a hybrid where you have the language line for languages that are fairly, that works well for you?
They're good for Spanish, yes.
You have a unique situation that maybe that's an in-person.
Right. Yeah, the language line's deficiency is mostly in the non-Spanish languages. And those are the ones where we're having to find the actual in-person translator. The language line actually, for Spanish, will actually have interpreters that specialize in court proceedings. They don't for any of the other languages. So not only do you have sometimes an English proficiency issue, you also have a technical issue that they don't know the legal terms as well. So for that, we have to rely upon in-person translators. And as you can imagine, the other half of that coin is it's easy to find an in-person Spanish translator, but it's not as easy for some of the other languages. We've never had a problem with that. And particularly, it's good that we can schedule them 2 or 3 weeks in advance. But that's somewhat more problematic.
Other questions for the judge?
Probably all wanting to know where the revenues are. They have taken a hit this year. At this time last year, we had collected revenue that came to the city of about $198,000. This year it's down to $53,000. Police essentially wrote no traffic tickets between March 15 and May 15. I think in April, they wrote a total of 4 tickets. And since then, traffic behavior amongst the Fishers public has changed accordingly. And yes, they're writing tickets now, but the speeds are up considerably from what they had been. Every session I see someone who's 75 or faster on Allisonville, 116th Street, something like that. So, but they are starting to resume their normal levels. Right.
Anything else for Judge Hingy? Sorry, Dan, I appreciate you run a very ship in your court, and I appreciate that very much.
I try to keep it lean.
You do a good job keeping everything lean and mean in your world, so we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
That's you know, like I said, I've been on your side of the table before, so I know how it works. And yeah, we'll just keep trying to do what we can. And thank you for seeing me this morning. But now I'm going to go on vacation. Mentally, I'm already there.
You are. Have a great vacation. Where are you going?
Pensacola.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Have a good trip.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thanks for coming, so.
Right. With that?
Better than the Wednesday option for you.
Yeah, well, yes. Definitely more convenient. So, thank you.
And as Dan mentioned, as the judge mentioned, you can see he's entirely flat. So we have, we need to have the discussion to switch, because they never use all supplies, so we can always, use that to cover interpreting services if that need arises. So, yeah, so, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dan.
So, go ahead and walk back up here to kind of get into this. So, professional services, so I'm going to walk you through. So these are how we group ourselves and how we identify ourselves at the city. So we have our departments shown up here. So this is administration, which is mayor's office, legal, business solutions group, customer service group, all that good stuff. So as you can see, we've got decrease in personnel services. We've got some position reductions in here. We actually have, I think, 3 or 4 in this group, but we had some changes in benefit elections, which kind of offset some of those changes, which were a lot. We had a couple people that weren't on the health plan that this year are on our health plan, so kind of didn't get as much hopeful savings, and also just a general change to some of the overall benefit elections for some people. Services and charges, as you guys know, we did change the non-for-profit allocation amount of around decrease it about $150,000. You don't see that full. It shows up in professional services and charges. You don't see that full amount because we've had an increase in business solutions groups, professional services. So there's some increasing costs with them related to the city software and programs of the city. So we still have some savings overall there, just not as much related to just a lot of software support, a lot of the getting into some of our initial software, some of this like third year, second year, you know, where your price starts to go up on the software. So got a big jump on that, but that's really the bulk. Supplies are flat for administration. This does include the assistant city attorney. As a lot of you recall, Lindsay Bennett left at the beginning of this year. That position is still open and vacant, and we did keep it in the budget for 21 because that is a position that probably does at some point probably need to be filled depending on how we go, or if there is an increased need for legal services. But a lot of this, I will say, on what I'd term the mayor's budget is flat or decreased. A lot of these, if there is an increase in this group, it's really related to business solutions. And I know, Beth, when we looked at the department budgets, it's really business solutions. Again, some of their, and then the internal training that business solutions is doing at the city related to some leadership academies and things like that. That's part of their change. Oh, sorry, any questions on that one?
Is this one also the 2 deputy mayor positions?
That does have the 2 deputy mayor positions in it, but it's not as huge because of, like I mentioned, we trued up some benefits for people that have changed, so.
But, going in, the mayor's
Yeah,
still not to fill those?
and they are not in the budget. The deputy mayors are not in the budget. And then we have a reduction of a customer service position. Also, we had Diana retire, and then we had 2 other people who left. We have filled 2 of those positions, but we don't see the need to fill the 3rd. So we've got a good number of positions on that one. And there could be some potential, like I said, more decreases, but our big thing was really, really kind of scouring and scrubbing everyone's elections and benefits this year too, to make sure.
The customer service, is that somewhat technology related, or is that when you moved everybody?
It's kind of when we moved everybody, so it's the group that sits at front at city services, and now the group that sits in the front at city hall, and kind of,
For everything now?
yeah, to kind of just oversee kind of those open, like reception area positions and kind of facilitate visitors that come in. Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of call them the customer service group. So, controller, this is us, it's flat. We're decreased with removal of PTO cash out. The only thing is we have a little bit of an increase in the utility funds, sewer and stormwater. We switched to Munis this year for utility. It's been a lot. Probably, switching in the middle of a pandemic. Switching software is hard anyway. Switching in the middle of a pandemic is even harder. So we kind of increased professional services for potential munis utility support for our utility team, just to kind of help ease some of that, because a lot of times if we need something customized or some help, that does not usually come a lot of times free with that. So that are really from the utility funds, so not a general fund hit on those. But other than that, we're flat. So economic development, truing up, like I said, some benefit and some salary changes in there, but then Megan Baumgartner really has cut a lot on her budget overall in some professional services, reduction in some marketing and advertising. So overall, almost over a $25 decrease to her, which is pretty substantial, and she feels really comfortable with those changes.
And what kind of I know it's probably more a question for her, but what type of marketing and things, just, times her roles,
It's
like a force multiplier to get.
yes, and it was, I can't remember if it was, she's looked at some different options, and I can't remember what she wants to this is a very probably specific question, and Megan could probably answer it, that she had an idea of what she could kind of switch kind of the focus of what she was doing and save some money with her kind of marketing on that end. Human resources got really no PTO cash out, and then they had a budget for a summer intern. They've taken that's out of there. One of the things that we have discussed with HR is shifting some of their allocation in their professional services budget, keeping their professional services budget flat, but internally shifting some of their costs to potentially increase the tuition reimbursement that's available to employees. So that's been a big push for Ethan Lee in HR and Whitney Muha, just because that it's kind of first come, first serve on tuition reimbursement. So you complete the class and then you apply for reimbursement. So it can get burned through pretty fast depending on who's taking advantage of it. So they wanted to potentially shift some of those funds and hopefully increase that. And I think they had some savings that they thought they could shift around, and keeping their budget flat, but increasing that amount that's available to employees to help with. And there are certain requirements. It has to be somewhat related to your field of study and some of that. I know you a little bit more, but it's really related to a lot of the police department uses it for master's work. Some of the fire department uses it. We've had Gerard Franklin in community engagement that's used it related to his master's. So some of those type of things. So.
I have a question. How many typically per year take advantage of that program? Employees, do you know? Like, do we have quite a bit that?
So based on what we have, which is normally between the $10,000 generally budget, and we get an allocation from about somewhere around $5,000. Normally spend all of that each year. I would say 10 people generally take advantage of that.
You have to, if I recall, and I think you have to go through and you have to pay for the class yourself first and do it. So it's not like we pay in advance for you to take the class. So it is getting the funding to take your class, do everything, and then when you're done and you have your grade, then you can submit for reimbursement. So that is part of that.
Up to $1,000
Yeah.
per class reimbursed. So it can go pretty quickly.
So you say that gets used fairly quickly. Do we have any idea of the number of people that's applying but don't get reimbursed?
HR
Yeah.
definitely does. I know I have information on what we've actually provided, but above and beyond that, we have to get that from
HR. And I will say, I think their concern was that there are some years when you get it and it can run out. I think the other thing is they wanted some additional funding because potentially if you have somebody that does a couple classes early, then there are sometimes when it runs out in June. And then if somebody takes a class in July, August, they don't have that potential for reimbursement because the funds are gone. But, we can circle back with Ethan on the numbers of people, but I think it was enough that I think it's kind of been a concern of theirs in HR to kind of help, facilitate maybe increasing that.
I think I was gonna ask kind of the same thing that Selena did, but just what does that number need to be? Just because it's obviously cheaper to keep an employee than to
Bill,
fill
yeah.
that position, plus, it makes them better, for their job, so.
Yeah, we can reach out. Ethan will have the numbers on the people that, have reached out to HR after the tuition has been fully used, so. But that's kind of an interesting, one, and I don't think we really have talked about the tuition reimbursement program much in context, so, wanted to bring that up. PR, so PR looks like a huge change. Really, what happened is you've got 3 positions that have switched. So you had the community engagement team, where those were 3 people in 3 distinct, or in 2 different, in parks, and then in Gerard's case, in BSG. And so now that they report to Ashley and PR, we've moved their reporting umbrella under Ashley and the PR group. So that's really what that increases, is essentially moving those 3, and benefits, because I think that's the thing too. Benefits are always other than that, Ashley is flat, so. We talked about the judge, the city clerk, and Jennifer, feel free to chime in, but we kept you're exactly flat. Your funding, you usually don't go through everything on supplies and services and charges. The only thing was a budget of, we had split the kind of clerk position between admin, and so we kind of trued that up a little bit this year. But that's kind of a 1.5 positions essentially in the clerk's office, like we have discussed. So, true up of that one. The planning department. So this is Tony Bagatos. Right now, he has an open position of a planner, and he is not going to fill that. He lost a planner this year, and just has decided he doesn't have a need to fill that position, at least right now, and so we're not going to budget for that for 21. Right now, Tony's been operating with really no assistant director, so just kind of some elevated levels for people in his department, so that's the huge change for his personnel services. In his professional services, he does still have amounts budgeted that relate to the neighborhood matching and kind of the arts and culture stuff. So just to kind of point that out to everybody, that is still right now in Tony's, in the planning budget, the neighborhood matching grant. And I have not talked to Tony. I don't know how much he's given so far for neighborhood matching this year.
We did for 19 in those 2 areas, just to compare those.
Yeah, I can put the matching. Yeah, I can ask him, because I think we moved the neighborhood matching in 19. So I'll see what he did in 19, and then
What we're doing here with that.
Yeah, and when I put that up there, I just was thinking, I'm like, I don't think I've talked to him about what utilization he's had on matching, but we can talk to him about that.
Yeah,
But
finding that out. I have a question here. So we have these positions, these open positions, a lot of them not being backfilled and things like this. We're looking into 21. So my question is how do we handle it if we really need a position in some department backfilled because of the workload in that department, because we don't want to overload the people there and cause them to leave? How do we manage to that type of scenario? I mean, just with the number of positions that we're eliminating, I have concerns that may happen somewhere.
well, I do. There are positions that have been So the question becomes, do you utilize the position that it was kept for, or do you transition it to where the need is?
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, so it's not, so while we've reduced some positions, there are some budgets that do have an open position, and then it becomes a conversation of who has potentially an open position, and if your need is greater, like, what is the greater need?
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how I would term it, is, I'll throw out the assistant city attorney, for example. We have that budgeted for 21 as an open position, but as we get into 21, is the need still, what's the greater need? Is it this position, or is it another position?
That's what I was asking.
Yes,
is
so-
how do we accommodate?
And so I will say, we've really tried to work hard to identify positions that we think are not needed to be filled right now, but there are still, like I said, a few open positions that are budgeted for. And so then the question becomes, as we move through these couple months, where does the need lie?
Okay.
That, yeah. So it's really, and like, for example, Tony's the one who took a really hard look at his and thought, this is what I'm doing this. He hasn't had an assistant director in a year and a half since Kevin left. And so then with the planning, he thought, you know what, this is, enough that my team should be able to take this on, was kind of his thought process. It was kind of in that middle of, would it be really, really nice probably to have somebody else? Maybe it'd be really, really nice, but is it essential kind of role? So that's kind of how I would term that.
And you kind of answered my question, maybe, I was thinking Kevin Stotts was this year, so Kevin Stotts and Dale Davis, so Kevin was actually 2 years ago.
I think-
Fines.
Yeah,
So
You're
Dale
right,
was
it's 2 years
one.
ago.
yeah,
That's
yes, so, yes.
replacing.
Yeah, so yeah, I think Kevin was 2, and then I think Dale was last year. So he's been kind of in flux, or, and not flux, but he's had a lot of turnover in that department. And I think as he kind of looks forward and kind of sees, as he works on the 2040 plan too for Tony, I think he's kind of trying to see what that is, if there is that. And so one of the other things too that comes up is, for example, like we've talked about with me, our department, we have some need for help, but we don't know if it's a long-term need. So we're using, some temporary help right now to see what that looks like and do. And I think that's kind of not necessarily for like a lot of the skilled positions, but you know where I'm going with that. Permits and inspections is really the big change. So what's happened is we've moved a lot, and you'll see when we get to fire, you'll see fire's personnel change significantly. They're decreased a lot, whereas P&I is up, and we moved what used to be the fire inspectors from being under the fire umbrella to under permits and inspections, because now they're going to do not just fire inspections, but do different types of inspections. So for reporting purposes, they've moved under the P&I umbrella, and the same with kind of these increases there. Those are really bringing on the fire inspectors, and so a lot of this is offset when we get to fire. Let me see if I can find fire. So as you can see, I'll go up to fire. Fire's got a really significant decrease for a couple reasons. So this net change, everybody's getting their steps in longevity in fire, but then they still overall have a really net decrease because of moving personnel from the fire department into P&I. So kind of wanted to show that. This is engineering change, everybody's flat, PTO cash out. Supplies, there was just kind of a shift internally between engineering and public works about who's going to pay for some things. So engineering took over signal inspection and maintenance, and so that was corresponding. Public works reduced their budget. Looks like their capital's increased significantly. What's happened is usually the capital for stormwater was budgeted to Rick Farnham and Public Works, and then we transferred it mid-year to engineering. So this year, we actually, for 21, are just planning on putting it under engineering to begin with. So that's predominantly their capital out of stormwater. The police department is really where we're seeing the big change. So they've gotten steps in longevity. They've removed PTO cash out. So one of the things that we have been working really hard with police is figuring out some budgetary personnel issues. And so what is happening is we've got, they're budgeted, and I don't want to say budgeted, but we've always been budgeting shift patrol. You can correct me on the shift part of this, as 80 hours and calculating a rate for them at 80. However, they work 86, and no one ever told us they work 86. So we're missing, for a lot of those shift patrol officers, hour gap. So what we've tried to do is correct that. And so this has kind of been an ongoing conversation with Chief Gephardt too, as we've looked, because his overtime budget, like the chief has managed his overtime budget great, his overtime budget, and he's got like savings in there, but those savings are kind of getting eaten away by this 80 to 86 issue. That's what we're trying to reflect here, is to what I term really true people up and correctly budget for them. And so in the past 2 years, we have had police where we've had to shift funds to budget them. So that's really what this is, and it's not every single shift patrol officer works 86, but most of them do. So that's really the bulk of this. And it's taken a long time to figure kind of the root cause of this issue, but we've got that figured out. And obviously you have to pay people for the hours they work. That's kind of a key component of things. So that's really what this is. And, you know, as we talked to the chief, that's, you know, he's extremely flat, decreased in everything else, but the one area he can't really control on that end.
Real quick on OT, is that, and it's sort of police, fire, probably public works too, because we haven't had festivals, we haven't had some other things where some of those departments probably we would have been utilizing those hours there. Is that correct, the way you think of it?
Yeah, so police had a little bit of savings in terms of they weren't working like, let's say, Bridge Blast or Spark this year. Public Works has, while they don't have the festival or some of that, they've had some pretty high, I would say, OT just related to the concrete crews, because they've been out overnight, I think, and doing those. So they've had some work. But on the police side, it's been pretty lean. And so so there should be a little bit potentially of savings with them on that.
I think they're on my mind if we things.
Yeah. So those are a few.
So.
Yeah. So overall, and we've had lots, and I think we've had lots of conversations with people as they start kind of looking at these, and we've looked at things, and you'll see it when we get to Public Works too. We've had lots of conversations in the past couple of months about, in the police officers is one indication, but then it also comes to the civilian side. So the civilian side, as you guys know, is a 35-hour work week here. So it's 35 hours. Well, if somebody works between 35 and 40, they don't hit the OT. They don't hit OT, but they hit extra hours paid. And so what you'll see is, and what we've really noticed with a lot of departments as we've really dug into this, is that you get people that are working up to, but not over, into the 40. They don't kick them into overtime, but you've got this, like, what I'd almost term you've got 5 hours that are essentially, in a lot of ways, unaccounted for. And so that's where we've really been kind of working really hard, and that Laura Groff in my department has worked really hard at trying to really run reports and kind of capture those and see what is the true cost of people's 35 to 40 if you're civilian, and what is it, you know, the 80 to 86. Fire does actually not have this issue because they're pretty they're night, you know, they're long shift, short shift. They don't have that variable. It's the day-to-day people. And so we've worked really kind of, and, you know, I think it was in terms of a conversation with supervisors and managers as explaining that, yes, you guys think they're not into overtime yet, so it's not really affecting me. But you're also, if I've only budgeted somebody for 35 hours a week, you're letting them work 39 for 52 weeks of the year. You've got a pretty big gap that you need to manage, and you need to understand that. So I think there's been a lot of awareness that we've had to bring to people to kind of keep a better eye on some of that. So
I have applies for the police. It was a pretty significant decrease, the 30,000. I just want to make sure that they've really looked at that. I mean, all the other departments seem to have, like, either they were flat or increased. So I just didn't know if that's,
I mean,
again, given COVID and all these other things, I don't know what.
I know you've talked to the chief recently, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so I will just say the chief over the last year and a half or so has really taken a lot of time to look into his budget and to the efficiencies within his department. So we have reduced the number of credit cards within the department to make sure that people are paying attention to what they're buying. With most of the body-worn camera program now coming online, and we've purchased a lot of that, some of the extras for supplies that we've needed for that program aren't needed anymore because we've purchased those out. So he's done a lot of work to kind of cut out the unnecessary items within his budget. So that 30,000 for him is very comfortable because he's well aware of what the needs are in within his department. So thanks.
So we talked about fire for a minute. Like I said, slight increase again to their supplies, but overall decrease, and really that equates to what they used to have in what they termed their fire inspection unit, which is over in P&I. So their budget doesn't reflect, like I mentioned, there's steps in longevity, but the removal of PTO cash out is pretty substantial because it really hits police and fire the most that cash out on PTO. Fleet, again, supplies are pretty decreased, and that's Tabitha runs a pretty tight ship. If you know Tabitha, she's really comfortable with that number herself. The big thing is that she has now in her operating budget the payment for the Axon body-worn cameras. Before, there was a piece of it that was coming out of the fleet lease, and so we made the decision that it probably should come out of the operating budget now, and so that's what her budget reflects. And then really just Tabitha does run a really, really tight ship, but she's got a lot of vehicles to maintain and a lot of people. So she has obviously some unexpected things that come up. So she's one of those that really, and she already is aware of the 35 to 40 hours, but she's like, if it's got to get fixed, it's got to get fixed. So we're just kind of trying to true her up a little bit on that and get her kind of back to kind of a good neutral position. But again, none of this is fluffy or unnecessary. I mean, Tabitha has run a really tight ship and worked really hard to cut out anything. And there's, like I said, her increases are pretty needed in there. But Tracy, you can talk to your budget if you again, personnel, again, there's a little bit of with the IT, again, you come into that 35 to 40 hours with people that are either coming in to help with some outings or coming in early to do some things. So that's really just kind of truing that up. I mean, we got more people, you got more supplies, which is kind of a key piece of that. Overall, just a little bit of an increase, but we do have some capital projects that are in CCI and 21 for Tracy, which is the continuation of some of the cloud movement and things like that. But that's about it on his end. And as we get more we continue to kind of expand and have some ever-changing needs, or just get a little more expensive. Parks, big one, big decrease now, which moving to PR, is that really supplies, the agri park coming online, just trying to get supplies budgeted and get a need for that. Same with their professional services and charges. They have a little bit of a rent increase for some office space, and then a little bit of increase for some events they really kind of want to do. But overall, Sarah and Parks will spend everything they have, but Sarah's done a really good job of running a pretty tight ship on her end in Parks, and even this year trying to kind of reimagine some Parks events per se. But really, most of hers is related to opening of the agri park and just feed, and I guess feeding the sheep and what else, or I forget what else is out there. But
Does this include, I mean, this year, a lot of our events got canceled.
this assumes that we would still have, this budget does assume that you would have the events that you didn't get to have in 20. So you're still assuming that this budget does include, Spark. This does include having more concerts and things like that.
Okay.
Now,
I didn't expect it to go back to where it was before.
No, and then have a few, and so if we do, and if for some reason that changes, we'll probably do, we did this year was when we moved funds from, just pulled them back and said, hey, you're not having these events, you don't get these funds, they're gonna sit over here, no one can touch them, this is our unused appropriation balance, we're gonna, we always project, that $500,000, we're gonna bump that number up high as we can, and so, as, of course, Parks Department, they got the brunt of it, but they also were the ones who didn't have a lot of events, so we pulled a lot of things from them because you didn't have Spark, you didn't have Black Bridge, you didn't have some of those.
Yeah.
So if we get to, we'll plan for those, and then if we don't, we'll do the same thing, which is we'll pull them back, and you don't get to just spend them because you have them.
Yeah.
Type thing.
And Lisa, when you bring up, I think you mean this, but when you bring up the festivals and things, those are always on the top of mind, but there's also the other one, you get the fun book where the kid, they can do the thing over Billericay or Hall.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly, what I mean, those different programs.
Yes, they have so they do have program plan to bring some of those back, and
I think the man needs all that.
yeah. So kind of, I think, a goal in what a reimagined parks program will look like, but a plan to really still get out and be active in the community. Public Works, so again, and this is all public works, so this will incorporate streets, parks, which are the moat grounds, wastewater. So again, most of it is kind of capturing some of those hours, but overall, 17 is not a huge kind of change for a group that's got almost $9 million of payroll on that. Supplies, I know we've worked really hard with what I term the ground side of Public Works, so Eric Steiner and along with Eric Peppel, and kind of managing their budget and their kind of helping them stay in budget or cutting if need be. So kind of the same. The decrease in services is really, they made some cuts that were, I would say, easy to make, things that we could do. So I think we've talked about that in this group before, where changing kind of the scope of some contracts where our guys can be the ones out watering as opposed to hiring that service out. So those were cuts that Eric Steiner and Eric Peppel have really worked hard to make. In wastewater, we had a few things that Rick worked on to cut, and he's, like I said, still working on his project, but doesn't see a large need for a lot of capital, hopefully in 22, because most of his funds for the wastewater will come in that. But Public Works, like I said, is really the one besides fleet that's most affected by decreases in the gas tax and things like that. And so both fleet and Public Works have worked pretty hard to identify things. And then I would say even within this, they have internal ideas about if they need to cut things, what things can be reduced, but still maintain, and which is very important to them also, is the quality of service that people expect, or the quality and the look that people expect, kind of maintaining that. That's their goal. So this is,
Back to that real quickly. So if you net out the, capital, which I understand we had a couple big projects.
yeah,
So they're still down a couple $100,000, which is great,
yeah,
but, so that assumes an X number of needs for snow removal and all the different things.
yes.
God forbid we have a bad winter and things like that.
So yeah, and it's kind of anticipated, and they also, and this doesn't include, they do have, while their personnel is kind of paid for like plowing under here, they do have some money in LRNS that they do use for salt too, and that doesn't show up in here. So they do have some, and there are a decent amount of funds in LRNS, but they pay for salt to partially MVH, partially LRNS, so most of it's LRNS, so they should hopefully be okay. And that's kind of, again, partially too, I would say part of that change is kind of trying to true up how we pay the snowplow people that we do have and when we do have them.
I do have a question here on maintenance. I'm not so sure that it's in this budget, but our building maintenance, you know, for City Hall,
Yeah.
some of the fire stations, I mean, you know, we have some older fire stations that we've had issues with, and we've worked to get some of those corrections done. But, you know, I'm looking at, we're not gonna be able to go in and do rebuild, we're not gonna be able to go in. Is that building maintenance fund being maintained or expanded even to make accommodations or where we're gonna have to go over the next few years?
Yeah, and so if you will, and Eric Steiner and Eric Fettel both have a pretty comprehensive, what I would term Category A, Category B, Category C, Category D list of capital maintenance items. And so a lot of their funding for that is from CCD, and we'll walk through some of their projects that they plan to do. But then I think unfortunately for them, best laid plans are, I'm gonna do A, B, and C next year, but something pops up over A. But they've got a list, and so what you'll see is kind of that priority listing of what those will be. And so there are some of the fire stations on there, and some of the other, what I'd term key fixes per se. So whether that's, you know, I think HVAC repair was this year, but you know what I mean, some of those new ones. And so then hopefully, you know, we've got two of the fire stations, hopefully with them being new, we don't have a lot of increased maintenance, but then it's kind of, they get added to the cycle, and that's kind of in, I forget what their public works software is that tells them when they need to do the maintenance on things. So they've also internally got that reminder of maintenance for smaller projects, but then they have that comprehensive, kind of what I'd term a capital list internally.
Fires were actually somewhat good, at least better shape than we were a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We got 91, 92, 93 of all, because even Brooksville was almost rebuilt.
Yeah.
And we got the brand new one, and then so really we got we've got Cumberland and probably 126 in Promise, or kind of that same age range. But the bulk of them.
Yeah, the bulk of them is redone, but I just know that, you know, we're not gonna be able to do a lot for the next few years. And
Yeah. So they've got internally what I would term those kind of based on need and what's kind of critical, what's versus nice. What we'd term are like really nice to have project versus kind of this is critical to keep this building up and functioning type thing. So this is the health department budget. So what we've reflected in this is there are 5 full-time positions of public health director, water quality manager, epidemiologist, health educator, communicable disease manager. So then, and I'll let you kind of speak to a lot of this, so I'll let Beth take it away. She and Monica have worked in tandem on a lot of this.
Yep, so those are the 5 full-time positions. You know, we are starting up the health department, so a lot of this is our best guess of what the needs are gonna be for next year to supply and set up the clinic, including software, equipment and, you know, just your consumable supplies that you're gonna need for any, health clinic. The interesting thing about this budget is that it is, while we know, and Monica has a very good list of things that she needs, to get going, there are opportunities from the state for grant funding. And so, some of that funding may be able to cover the, salary portion of a health educator. We'll be able to provide supplies for the clinics, and other emergency public health type activities. So the bulk, you know, we're gonna look at the maintenance contracts and IT services for, programs that she's gonna need to run the clinic, but she, it's a pretty lean budget for health department, especially at the setup, but, we think we have some opportunities to find some funds through grants that will help us, supplement this budget, and those may not be, some of them will be funds that will continue and they will be ongoing. There are 2 funds that come from the cigarette tax from the state, but those are, that's Indiana code, so those come every year. So we can count on those funds, but there will be other funds that we can't always count on, but right now they'll be good for us in terms of those one-time purchases, the things that we need right now. So we'll to supplement this budget a little bit, with those funds this coming year.
Specifically, the water quality manager, is that drinking water quality?
So that's like well and septic inspections, maintenance and permitting. And I think that encompasses the pool,
I think it does follow that.
public and semi-private, swimming pools. Yes, those get inspected.
But it's not other types of potable water like citizens would handle, or anything that Rick Farnham's group would handle on the
Correct.
other side, obviously.
Yes, correct. Those 2 positions won't, they don't overlap.
And the medical director?
That, contract is included in your services and charges budget.
Got it.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if we ever software, for medical records software, or is that?
Yes, the
This is
software is included in the budget now.
Okay.
However, that may change because there are some
Grant.
grants that are coming up right now that may help us this year, and that will change the budget for next year, or at least provide opportunity for other things that we didn't think we could do next year.
Any other questions on the health department? Kind of, like I said, it's been a work in progress and a kind of moving target, but having worked with Monica pretty closely, she feels really confident that these 5 positions are kind of the key positions for her. I think she has a little bit of, really was more key on the full-time positions in here. And then, as mentioned, we do have the public health director contract and services, professional services.
So our inspections, like of restaurants and things like that, that's being handled through the fire?
Through permits inspections, yeah, permits inspections now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Permits and inspections, because I just know some restaurants that have said, gosh, I've never seen anyone come in, and now they're like, we're seeing people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, well, glad we're doing a better job than the county is doing at that point, but.
Yeah. It's kind of, in terms of kind of P&I is kind of under the health department in terms of, because a lot of those inspections are going to relate, so that's kind of the umbrella of things. All right, the health department, and I'll explore. Then, like we've talked about, not a lot happening really right now. This is facilities and parks, and will be a lot of, mainly out of CCD. So the big thing is we set aside money for design and maybe land acquisition for Fire Station 97, which would be over on the far side of town. I put southeast Cynthia, but kind of that area. That's kind of what I'd term the big one as we explore that area and its need for a fire station. A lot of these were related to DPW and their list as to either safety or security needs. So a lot of them are or related to compliance for ADA. Some ADA upgrades also is really what a lot of this list is. Like I said, this is their goal list. So using one or two for fire stations, and that's kind of the capital, which is mainly, like I said, CCD, utility.
Now, wait a second on that one. So if I'm understanding, this fire station that would be out at Southeastern and Cynthia Ann, that's the one that would be replacing, we have I want to call it quasi fire station in the hospital out there. We're renting space from the hospital and things, but we're still having difficulty covering that area. Is that correct?
I did not know we were renting space from the hospital. I don't think we're renting.
We're not renting space from
They
the hospital?
provided a base.
Provided it. They gave it to us.
They
No
gave it
cost
to us, okay,
That's just for an ambulance, that's only a small crew of 2 paramedics.
okay.
And so I think they're envisioning a need for a full house in that part of the community eventually. And that would be fully staffed firefighters, water, and normal fire apparatus. Well, my understanding.
It's Saxony IU help.
Yeah,
I think they're just counting rooftops and trying to plan and
Yeah,
buy land.
you're right, David. You drive out there, you drive out there, and I just drive out there to drive around, and
It's from
there's gonna be demand there for station.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, look, figure out where the area needs to be. What does that need to do you need to get some option contract? What do you need to do to find some land while there is land, because you have a certain need for a fire station, obviously, that needs to meet some requirements, so.
And then, Saxony Hall, we didn't build that, is there something, is this being added to it, or?
I have to look at the list of the interior of it. I have to see what that was. I don't know if it was HVAC. They didn't put HVAC. We'll look at the detail of that one for you. But a lot of it, like I said, like the lift stations are really more some ADA compliance parts, safety with parking lot lights and things like that. And then fire suppression systems.
I see you're about out of battery, buddy.
David, I know that at Saxony
Out of
Hall,
battery.
what's that?
Oh, thank you.
At Saxony Hall, they'd been adding for a couple of years, trying to help mitigate with the echoing in there and putting in like panels to help with the noise, because it's an echo and you get a lot of people in there, so that could be it, but I don't know. Check on that.
Tentatively, these are kind of on Rick Farnham's side, what he has potentially planned to do related to some stormwater. So I don't know a lot of the intricacies of stormwater, but kind of those are his kind of lists. So potentially some issues on Hoosier Road, a lot of just drainage type thing. On engineering, focusing on 37. They're going to work on Geist Greenway next year, and then they're going to continue to work on, and then I think next year will be more heavy into just resurfacing and neighborhood kind of road repairs and things like that. And that Jason Taylor is kind of working on what that interior plan looks like and what neighborhoods will go through there. You guys know the fleet loan, this all replaces current equipment that we have. So again, continuing to cycle through the police cars, A lot of just for streets and replacement parts for salt spreaders, mowers, just kind of replacing some pretty old equipment that they have. You know, I think one of the things Tabitha had to replace the transit van, the old one is from 97, I think. There's some really pretty old equipment that they're still kind of using. Same with like, if you look at some of the permits and inspection guys that are out, or engineering, there are some pretty old cars on the road. So just kind of trying to get a cycle of replacements for safety purposes. So there is nothing, I don't say bright and shiny, but there is nothing that is like a new ad that is adding to the current fleet that we have. This is all replacement in some way, shape, or form of the current fleet we have and maintain. So kind of in line with what we traditionally have, and a lot of that's related to cycling through and just repairing the patrol cars. So other than that, that is everything in a nutshell on departments. A lot of information in that. So, is there any questions that?
Got a couple questions. One rather macro, one kind of micro. Macro, can we get more level numbers here? I'd like to see more detail. Possible? Can we get a little more detail on this if possible?
Yes, I have a pretty detailed packet. I would say, like, so it's got the fiscal plan in it, it's got the budget forms in it, and then it has some Excel sheets that compare all the departments, like fund by fund, that Carrie is preparing to send out today.
Okay, good.
Today to everybody. So it's about 160 pages, but I was going to send it out after we did this, and so.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that'll be the big picture. So it'll be, like I said, it's got the fiscal plan, it's got all the budget forms, and then the last piece is departmental, a little bit more comparisons and things like that. So.
Great. And also, so we'll get that, just everybody that's aware, we have another Budget and Finance Committee meeting next Wednesday, which will be talking about the budget again.
Yes, Mike Reuter will be coming in Wednesday also.
One thing I think is going to be really key is knowing what our top line numbers are. These numbers here, if we don't have the top line, we can't do that.
Yes, yes.
I'm really interested in really us being able to put those numbers down for us.
Yes, and so the documents that should get today will have revenue, expense, have that all in there.
This will be going out all the council members.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
And I want to make sure it gets out there.
Yeah.
One micro question, Tracy, just, I get we've had some issues over at City Hall with getting everything online, everything good there. You've done a fabulous job. You've been with us since, 2012, 2013? 2011. It's been phenomenal technology, what you've done from where we were to where we are now. And I always just, we've had a couple burps over at City Hall during council. I just want to make sure everything's good.
Yeah, I would say the equipment is operating as it was designed to. We do actually have a proposal, obviously with the pandemic and the change from the governor's rules to allow remote meetings and to do more teleconferencing and things. There has been sort of a change in demand, I would say. And obviously that room is a good example of that. So it's functional, but it certainly could be improved to be a little easier for, the flexibility that would be better. So to me, an ideal scenario would be a situation where 80% of the time you wouldn't have to have me or someone from my staff there to help conduct a meeting. So if it was a little more intuitive and user-friendly and less technical, but the ability, like from the podium, to be able to live stream without someone in the back of the room, to be able to have the audio in the room without that was not designed with what they call active noise cancellation. So when we have remote people talking, you've heard some of the loops and echoes and things that can happen. So we do have a proposal from our AV vendor that the mayor and our city attorney are reviewing. That may actually be eligible for the CARES Act to be reimbursed because that is a change in business due to the pandemic, and I know other communities have been looking into this. So as soon as we identify if there's funding and reimbursable opportunities, we may very well pull the trigger. I can go over the overall, but just appreciate that it would be a higher resolution, more flexibility, more remote meeting designed, and I think a better experience. We may also potentially do a little smaller scenario with some of our conference rooms,
Sure.
similar things like this.
Right.
So I think there's some opportunities to improve things, but overall, things work, and we can certainly manage if that doesn't come to pass, but if it does, there could be some improvements.
Thank you. I appreciate everything you're doing. I know difficult times here.
I have a question along those lines. Given that more is being done online, is there any way that you can get grants, you know, kind of like what you're talking about, funding from the CARES Act or whatever, to increase the security? So, I mean, I don't know, with things being online, are we more at risk of being hacked for things? I mean, that's.
Oh, yeah, now you get in my role. Never talk tech with a captain audience. So overall, what I would say is, as we do more things online, my general experience is the vast majority of what we do is a matter of public record. So these meetings that we're doing that are public, I don't have concerns about that being streamed and or housed online, and the information in that is not sensitive. There are a handful, of course, areas when you get into the health department, into police, and CJIS information, and in certain financial areas. That's where I really narrow in, concern myself more with security. And to that end, we, outside of the pandemic, we're very fortunate in Fishers that we have leadership that recognizes the sensitivity and the risks of cybersecurity, and we invest heavily in that. That's always my annual #1 identified goal from the mayor is, you know, as he likes to say, keep us out of the news and make sure that we aren't compromised. So we routinely are audited by third-party groups, and I'm routinely told that we're 1% of any public sector seen. Not to say that we're completely perfect and invulnerable, but we do invest so heavily, and I could get into the myriad of it's multiple solutions, multiple technologies, but it is not bleeding edge, but it is very current technology. It is not the normal stereotype in government where it's underfunded and understaffed and underconsidered. So we have a chief security officer. We have a very wide range of products and services and partners with third parties that are experts in that area. We monitor, I think, 900 gigabytes of log volume a month. We could talk about, there is an actual increase, of course, going into election time, and particularly in public, they don't appreciate that we don't do elections here in Fishers, so we do see activity sort of in our perimeter increasing. The FBI certainly also keeps us advised as they identify things. I will also say the FBI is going around to other communities and identifying, hey, you're vulnerable or you're compromised. They've never once come to us. So I think we're in a very strong position, and I'm not worried about it. But that being said, I think as long as we keep to maintain that level of funding investment that we've had, I don't have concerns. And thankfully, in this budget, we didn't have to do anything that gave me pause or things that we were creating risk of compromising anything. So I think we're in good shape.
It's just, you know, with people working from home, like Lisa working from home.
Oh, yeah.
That's my concern. It's not me,
Sure.
like.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so on that front,
Yeah.
real quickly, so we have two main technologies that are terrific. One, on all of the city issued laptops that we have, and this was really just fortuitous with the whole pandemic situation, we have used an application called NetMotion that is sort of the CJIS standard for law enforcement forever. So for our patrol cars out in the field, amongst other things, that is perpetual VPN, a virtual private network, and it redirects traffic back here. It encrypts everything, and it sort of checks all the boxes that law enforcement has. We just, on our site, we're going to put that on all cities, law enforcement. We're just going to have that so that people have access to all their map drives and all their network resources, regardless of where they are. So that is a real nice level of security. So when people are at home on, you know, or an unknown network, they're still being redirected back here to our security, to our policies, to our protocols. So that really does protect the endpoints very well. We also do have a significant number of virtual desktops. So that means if you're a remote worker, I think like our city attorney goes to a home computer, he's actually just remoting to a virtual machine at our data center. And he isn't doing anything locally on that machine. It's just keystroking video. So again, the data, the transactions, all of the protocol communications are happening in our data center and not going back and forth across that wire. So there really isn't a lot, I think, that's leaving our perimeter. But that being said, as we go into the cloud more and more, which is part of our overall IT sort of modernization initiative, security is paramount there. So that we can get into
Yeah. That's what I want, is just to make sure.
Yeah,
I've got the
security is
comfort
always
level.
something that if you plan for it and do it from the beginning versus trying to bolt it on after the fact, you're just not in a strong position. And fortunately, we have a lot of good technologies and good investments here that I'm very comfortable with. I don't think there's a glaring risk that, keep me up at night.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of the disadvantages of having a department head at a budget meeting.
Yeah.
Get asked questions, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no.
But great job.
Sorry to get geeky on you.
Anything else, Lisa?
No, not that I can think of unless anybody else has questions, but.
Ran a little bit over, but it was good time to run a little bit over.
So, yeah, and like I said, I'll talk to Carrie, but I was gonna have her disseminate that, because she's got everybody's emails, so.
Great. At this point, any other questions, I'll, make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Have a great rest of the week.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.